So they're in these houses, and for the first time, you're going to hear the company commander start to realize he's got people at their breaking point. Back to the book. The others were as uneasy as I was. For the first time, I was unhappy about them. Until now, they had endured the successive disasters, but the events of the morning had tried them too far. It had been yesterday once again, yet another failure against an enemy who is far too strong for us. Men were looking jittery. Some could be well near their breaking point. As I gazed down the slope trying to spot some activity among the Boche, a movement to the right caught my eye. About 20 yards away, 2 of Kelly's men were moving diagonally behind me, sheltered on the far side of the ridge. These are deserters. My shout made them hesitate, and then stop after 2 or 3 more steps. Forgetting the enemy, I stood up and strode down towards them. No explanation was necessary. The surly guilt on their faces was enough. Deliberately choosing words for effect, I cursed them in language rarely used by officers towards their soldiers. It was enough. The 2 men turned back towards their platoon. So, like I said, sometimes he's dropping the hammer. These 2 guys are trying to desert, and he goes on and drops the hammer on them and gets them back with their platoon. Back to the book. In this mood, the men would never stand up to an enemy attack. Even a mortar stonk could break them. I could see it happening. First 1 or 2 men would slip away like the 2 I had just stopped, and then a rush would follow. Something drastic had to be done. No more than the occasional rifle bullet was now coming over. In fact, no one had been hit since we took our positions along this ridge. It seemed safe enough. Standing up, I began to walk along the path towards the left of our position. For the first few steps, I felt wretchedly vulnerable, but then an odd exhilaration seized me. For the first few steps, I felt wretchedly vulnerable, but then an odd exhilaration seized me. Not too slowly and not too quickly, I strode deliberately toward the first group of men. Grinning down at Lance Corporal Williams, I made some inept remark about it being the wrong place for a company clerk. If I were to be hit, it would happen anyway. Now seemed to be as good a time as ever. Stopping at each group of men, I checked their firing positions and made necessary changes. Then I was at the end of Kelly's line, and I started back, conscious that everyone was watching. There was a burst of machine gun fire well wide of us, but I managed to avoid flinching at it. Suddenly, Sergeant Weiner's voice, harsh with concern, was yelling at me to get down, demanding angrily what I was playing at. The spell broke. I was grateful for the excuse to lower myself down beside him, very relieved that it was over. The rage in Weiner's face dissolved into an unaccustomed grin. The corny dramatics were over, but they had served their purpose. The men had got a grip on themselves. So he basically stood up and walked around and talked to everyone and made himself visible and made himself appear to not be scared to get the guys' heads back in the game until his Sergeant Weiner yells at him and says, "Hey, dude, get down."